We invite them into our homes. We call them family. We think we understand their language. A bark for hunger, a purr for contentment. But what if they speak another language? One much older than words. A language of pure instinct. A direct line to the vibrations of the world, to the tremors of the earth, and the hidden weaknesses in our own walls. My investigation has repeatedly shown me that the most honest signals come from those who cannot lie. The records I'm opening today are about these silent guardians who live among us. We will hear the account of a family whose dog became the only safety engineer to detect a deadly structural flaw in their home. And then, the story of a couple whose cat, with its terrified behavior, became the most accurate seismograph in the city, predicting an earthquake. Is it just their superior hearing or keen sense of smell? Or are our pets truly our protectors, our first line of defense against dangers we are completely blind to? The Aisai. Two incredible stories you are about to hear suggest that we should pay much closer attention when our best friends tell us something is wrong. Story 1. The dog who watched the ceiling. My name is Jessica. My husband David and I have a 10-year-old son, Noah, and a 7-year-old golden retriever named Buddy. And if you ask me, I have 2 sons. Buddy isn't a pet. He's the furry, 4-legged heart of our family. He's a typical golden. Goofy, loves everyone, and his entire world revolves around being exactly where we are. His favorite place on earth was the dead center of the living room rug. It was his stage. He'd lie there while we watched movies, while Noah built Lego towers around him. That room was his kingdom, which is why it was so strange when one day he abdicated the throne. It started on a Tuesday. I came home from work and Buddy wasn't in his usual spot. I found him lying in the hallway, right at the edge of the doorway to the living room. He thumped his tail when he saw me, but he wouldn't get up and cross the threshold. "Come on, you lazy mutt," I joked, trying to coax him in. He just whined, a low, anxious sound deep in his chest, and wouldn't budge. David came home an hour later, and the same thing happened. We tried calling him, offering treats, even tossing his favorite squeaky tennis ball into the middle of the room. He would stretch his neck, follow the ball with his eyes, but a strange, invisible wall seemed to be holding him back at the doorway. "Maybe he's sick," I said to David that night, a knot of worry in my stomach. This isn't like him. David, ever the rationalist, knelt down and gave Buddy a good scratch behind the ears. "He seems fine. Eating okay, drinking okay. He's probably just being a weirdo. Maybe he saw a spider in there and it freaked him out. He'll forget about it by tomorrow." But he didn't forget. The next day was the same, and the day after. Buddy established a new routine. He would follow us everywhere in the house. But if we went into the living room, he would stop at the doorway and just lie there, watching us with the saddest, most worried eyes I'd ever seen. The room, once the center of our family life, started to feel strange, unwelcoming. We found ourselves spending less time in there, simply because Buddy's anxious presence at the door was so unsettling. On the 3rd day, his behavior escalated. It was no longer a passive refusal. It was an active warning. He started barking at the room. It wasn't his usual squirrel in the yard bark. It was a low, persistent, worried woof, woof, directed not at the furniture, not at the windows, but at the ceiling. He would just stand at the doorway, his head cocked, and stare intently at one specific spot on the ceiling, right above his old spot on the rug, and let out these soft, troubled barks. "Okay, this is officially creeping me out," I told David. "He's barking at the ceiling. What is that?" "Maybe there's a mouse in the attic," David suggested, though neither of us really believed it. "I'll check it out this weekend." But Buddy's anxiety was contagious. I started to feel it too, a vague sense of unease whenever I was in that room. I started inspecting it like a detective. I checked the outlets. I looked for signs of pests. I sniffed the air for weird smells. I found nothing. The room was exactly as it had always been. My rational mind was siding with my husband, but my heart was with my dog. I knew, with the certainty of someone who had raised this dog from a clumsy puppy, that he was trying to tell us something. He was scared, and his fear was making me scared too. I even made an appointment with the vet, convinced he might have a neurological problem. The breaking point was Saturday morning. We were all in the kitchen. David was making pancakes, I was reading the news on my tablet, and Noah was watching cartoons. Buddy was lying at my feet. Suddenly, a heavy truck rumbled down our street. The windows rattled for a second, a perfectly normal occurrence. But Buddy shot up as if he'd been electrocuted. He bolted to the living room doorway and started barking frantically at the ceiling. Loud, sharp, terrified barks this time. He would bark, then whine, then look back at us with an expression of pure, desperate panic. That was it. I stood up. Something is wrong, David. I don't know what it is, but I'm not ignoring this dog for another second. My husband saw the look on my face. He turned off the stove. Okay, Jess. Okay. I went to the doorway and stood next to Buddy. He quieted down, nudging my hand with his nose, but his eyes were still fixed on the ceiling. I looked up. In the soft morning light, for the first time, I saw it. It was so faint, I would have never noticed it if I hadn't been staring. A tiny hairline crack in the plaster. It was maybe a foot long, running parallel to, the thick, old support beam that spanned the width of our living room. I had a sudden cold flash of memory. Had that been there last week? I didn't think so. David, I said, my voice quiet. Come look at this. He came over, and I pointed. He squinted. Huh, looks like the plaster just settled. This old house is full of little cracks like that. No, I said, my intuition now screaming as loudly as the dog. This one is new. I know it is. Please call someone. To his credit, he did. I think my conviction finally broke through his skepticism. He found a structural engineer who, by some miracle, was willing to come out on a Saturday. Mr. Harrison arrived an hour later, a serious man with a clipboard. We explained the situation, feeling a bit foolish. So, our dog has been barking at the ceiling, I finished lamely. He didn't laugh. He just nodded and looked at the dog, who was still standing guard at the doorway. Animals are smarter than we give them credit for, he said. He looked at the crack, tapped the wall, and then said, I need to see the attic space above this room. He was up there for what felt like an eternity. We could hear him walking carefully on the rafters, the sound of a powerful flashlight clicking on and off. When he finally came down the attic ladder, his face was pale. He took off his dust mask, and his expression was grim. He looked at me, then at David. I want you to get your son and your dog and wait outside in the yard, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Right now. We did as he said, a cold dread washing over us. We stood on the lawn, watching the house, as if it might collapse at any moment. A few minutes later, Mr. Harrison came out. Your dog didn't just save you a repair bill, he said, his voice heavy. He saved your family's lives. He explained it. The main support beam in our attic, a massive piece of old timber, had a deep, hidden fracture running almost all the way through it. It was the result of a slow, unnoticed roof leak from years before we'd even bought the house. The wood had rotted from the inside out. He said it was holding the weight of the roof by sheer force of habit. The only thing keeping it from snapping completely was the lack of any significant stress. The vibrations from that truck this morning, he said, that could have been it. The next heavy rain, a big snowstorm this winter, this beam would have failed. The entire roof over your living room would have collapsed. He said Buddy wasn't seeing a ghost. He was likely hearing things we couldn't, the ultrasonic stress cries of wood fibers tearing apart. Or maybe he was feeling the infinitesimal sag in the floorboards above. Or maybe he just knew. We never used the living room again until the repairs were done. It cost a fortune, but none of that mattered. That night, Buddy finally walked back into the living room, sniffed the air, and settled down on his favorite spot on the rug as if nothing had ever happened. So I ask you, especially if you have a pet, don't just treat them like a pet. Treat them like a member of your security team. Has your animal ever acted strangely? Been scared of a specific place in your own home? Don't just dismiss it. Go look. Check the walls. Check the ceiling. They might be trying to tell you about a monster you can't see. Buddy the dog sensed a sickness within the house itself, a slow, creeping decay, a danger that had been growing silently over years. His warning was persistent, a quiet and stubborn vigil. He was an engineer, detecting a flaw in a man-made structure. But what about dangers that don't come from within our walls, but from the very ground beneath our feet? Threats that are not slow and decaying, but sudden and violent, affecting not just one house, but an entire city. Does the warning system change? The next account suggests it does. It's not about a dog's patient vigilance, but about a cat's sudden, explosive panic. A 5-minute warning for a force that can level cities in seconds. Story 2. The Cat and the Quake. My name is Liam. My wife Chloe and I live in Seattle. We're renters in a charming second-floor apartment in an old brick building in Capitol Hill. Seattle is not exactly earthquake country, not like California. We get the occasional small tremor, the kind that makes you look at your glass of water and wonder if you imagined it. We have earthquake kits somewhere, gathering dust. It's a background threat, not a daily reality, or so I thought. Our reality check didn't come from a seismologist or a citywide alert. It came from a 7-pound ball of fluff and anxiety named Jasper. Jasper is our cat. We adopted him from a shelter 2 years ago. He's a creature of routine and comfort. His days consist of a rigid schedule: sleep in the sunbeam, demand food, stare at a bird outside the window, nap on the clean laundry, and finally, curl up on the sofa with us in the evening. He is, in a word, predictable. He is not a fan of loud noises or sudden movements. The vacuum cleaner is his mortal enemy, but I had never seen him truly scared. Not until that Saturday. It was a lazy, gray Seattle afternoon. Chloe and I were lounging in the living room reading. Rain was pattering against the window. It was cozy, peaceful. Jasper was doing what he did best, sleeping in a perfect orange circle on his favorite armchair, soaking up the ambient heat from the radiator, the very picture of domestic bliss. At precisely 3:12 p.m., the bliss shattered. Jasper exploded. He went from a deep sleep to a state of pure, feral panic in a split second. He leaped straight up into the air with a yowl that didn't sound like it came from him. It was a guttural, terrifying sound, a sound from a wild animal. His fur was on end, his back arched, his eyes wide, black dinner plates of terror. He hit the floor and started darting around the apartment frantically. He wasn't playing. This was blind panic. He ran low to the ground, hissing at things we couldn't see, as if hiding from a predator circling above. He tried to claw his way under the bookshelf, then scrambled behind the curtains, his claws tearing at the fabric. "What on earth got into him?" Chloe said, putting her book down, her face a mask of confusion. "Jasper! Hey buddy, what is it?" I called out, trying to keep my voice calm. He ignored me. After a few more seconds of frantic scrambling, he bolted into our bedroom and disappeared under the bed. A moment later, we heard the sound of his claws scratching frantically at the floorboards, as if he was trying to dig his way through the floor to escape. We looked at each other, bewildered. "Did you hear something?" I asked. "A car backfiring? A siren?" "No," she said. "Nothing." We went to the bedroom. I knelt down and peered into the darkness under the bed. All I could see were his 2 terrified, glowing eyes staring back at me. I tried to coax him out. I used his favorite soft voice, offered him his favorite crinkly toy. Nothing. I tried to reach for him, and he let out a vicious hiss that made me pull my hand back. "Okay, this is officially bizarre," I said, sitting back on my heels. "He's never done this before." Chloe was starting to get worried. "Maybe he's in pain. Should we call the emergency vet?" "I don't know. He seems less hurt and more terrified," I reasoned. "Maybe a mouse got in, or he saw a big spider." We were grasping at straws, trying to find a logical explanation for a completely illogical event. The cat's raw, unfiltered terror was starting to leak into the room, making the hair on my own neck stand up. It felt wrong. The quiet, peaceful atmosphere of our apartment had been replaced by a tense, nervous energy, all because our cat was having what we tried to dismiss as a freak-out. For the next 5 minutes, we tried everything. We opened a can of tuna, his absolute favorite, and put it near the bed. He didn't even emerge. We could just hear his panicked, muffled yowls and the sound of his scratching from under the bed. Chloe was kneeling by the bed, talking to him in a soft, cooing voice, trying to calm him down. I was in the kitchen, feeling useless, looking up sudden cat anxiety on my phone. And that's when the world started to rumble. It began as a low, deep vibration, a sound that seemed to come from the very bones of the building. It wasn't a truck passing. It was different, deeper. Then the shaking started. It was gentle at first, a slight tremor. The picture frames on the wall began to rattle. I looked at the glass of water on the counter. The surface was trembling, creating concentric rings. "Liam!" Chloe called from the bedroom, her voice tight with a new kind of fear. The shaking grew stronger, more violent. The rattling of the pictures became a loud clatter. The old brick building began to groan around us. In the kitchen, a stack of plates on a shelf slid and crashed to the floor, shattering. The shaking probably only lasted for 20 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. It felt like the solid ground I had trusted my entire life had turned to liquid. Because of Jasper's bizarre panic, we were already on high alert. Our adrenaline was already pumping. Chloe, who had been kneeling by the bed, instinctively dove under the sturdy wooden bed frame the moment the shaking started. I, in the kitchen, dropped my phone and scrambled under the heavy oak dining table. We didn't freeze. We didn't waste precious seconds trying to figure out what was happening. We reacted instantly because our cat's terror had been our unofficial 5-minute early warning system. The earthquake, we learned later, was a 4.8. Not a major disaster, but strong enough to cause minor damage and widespread panic throughout the city. The news was filled with stories of injuries, mostly from falling objects inside people's homes. Ceiling fixtures crashing down, heavy bookcases toppling over. Our upstairs neighbor's brand new 70-inch TV was now a pile of broken glass on his floor. But in our apartment, aside from the broken plates, nothing else fell, and we were completely, totally unharmed. We had been in the safest possible places because we'd been drawn there by our pet's inexplicable terror. When the shaking stopped, there was a dead silence. And then, slowly, Jasper crawled out from under the bed. He wasn't panicked anymore. He blinked, shook himself, and started calmly licking his paw as if nothing had happened. The show was over. His job was done. So I'll ask you, especially the cat owners out there, we joke about their random sprints through the house, their sudden freak-outs. But have you ever had a cat get truly, inexplicably terrified, moments before something strange happened? Don't just write it off as them being weird. They might be feeling the first tremors of a world you can't yet perceive. They might be your silent guardian, a dog who watched a ceiling, and a cat who sensed the trembling of the earth. 2 stories, 2 silent guardians, and 1 single powerful truth. They know. Somehow, they just know. Buddy's warning was a long and patient vigil, a premonition of a danger hidden within, a slow, man-made collapse. Jasper's warning was an explosion of panic, a reaction to a danger that came from without, a sudden, natural violence. These stories show the incredible breadth of animal sensitivity. They seem to have one sense for decay and another for geological tension, an alarm for the sickness of the house and another for the fever of the planet. But is it just a mystical 6th sense? Or could there be a physical explanation? Something our instruments and our limited human senses simply fail to detect. My investigation into these cases led me to a conversation with a researcher in bioacoustics, and what she explained was stunning. She is an expert in infrasound, sounds at a frequency so low they are inaudible to humans, but which dogs and cats can detect. She explained that the 2 sources of danger in the stories, a wooden beam under extreme stress about to break, and tectonic plates shifting before an earthquake, produce the exact same phenomenon, infrasound waves. What the human protagonists experienced as silence was to their pets a deafening roar. Jasper's panic was a reaction to a sudden, high-pitched screech from the earth. Buddy's persistent anxiety was a reaction to a long, low groan coming from the very structure of his home. The premonitions weren't magic. They were perfectly literal. We fill our homes with alarms for smoke and carbon monoxide, but perhaps the best alarm system is the one curled up at the foot of your bed, listening to a language of danger that we have long forgotten. How to hear.